You won't believe how this story unfolded. When two powerful voices in the modern church slowly moved toward a collision no one saw coming. It all started as quiet conversations, subtle comments, and sermons that seemed harmless on the surface. Let me tell you, at that time, no one imagined that these words would later shake the Christian community and divide believers across generations. The story was not just about two leaders, it was about authority, influence, and the soul of church leadership itself. At the center of this growing tension were Donnie McClurkin and Bishop Gino Jennings. Both were respected, followed, and deeply influential, yet they carried very different characteristics. Donnie was known as gentle, emotional, and compassionate. He had led people through worship, pain, healing, and personal testimony. His leadership style had always felt open, warm, and welcoming. Gino Jennings, on the other hand, had built his reputation on strict discipline, bold speech, and an unshakable stand on holiness. He was fearless, direct, and uncompromising. This is how two paths that once seemed separate slowly began to move toward each other. The Christian world had already been changing. Churches were growing more modern. Worship was becoming more expressive, and leaders were finding new ways to connect with broken people. Donnie McClurkin stood as a symbol of that shift. His past struggles, his honesty about pain, and his music had made him relatable. People felt seen through his ministry. Many believed he represented grace in action. But at the same time, voices like Gino Jennings were growing louder, warning that the church was drifting away from truth. He believed leadership meant correction, not comfort, and order, not emotion. But here's the shocking part. This clash did not begin with a direct argument. It started with words spoken in sermons, interviews, and public messages that seemed general but carried deeper meaning. Gino Jennings often spoke against celebrity pastors and gospel figures who, in his view, softened the message to please people. He warned that holiness was being replaced with popularity. Many listeners felt those words landed close to Donnie's style of leadership. Even though names were not mentioned, the message felt personal. What makes this story different? Donnie did not respond with anger. He spoke calmly, focusing on love, balance, and grace. He explained that leadership without compassion could push people away from God. His tone remained soft, but his message was firm. He believed truth and love belonged together. That contrast made people pay attention. The craziest part was how quickly the audience took sides, even before the two men openly addressed each other. As these messages spread online, destiny took an unexpected turn. Short clips began to circulate. One clip showed Gino's fiery warnings. Another showed Donnie's emotional words of healing. Side by side, the difference felt extreme. Viewers began to argue in comments, churches began to whisper, and questions grew louder. Who was right? Was leadership about strict rules or open arms? This is where it gets interesting because the debate was no longer controlled by the two men. It was now in the hands of the people. Behind the scenes, pressure was rising. Interviews were asking harder questions. Supporters were demanding clarity. Critics were becoming louder. Yet both leaders stayed firm in their characteristics. Donnie remained patient, empathetic, and focused on reaching the broken. Gino remained bold, sharp, and focused on correcting what he believed was wrong. The tension kept building, and the silence between them made everything feel heavier. The story twisted further as people realized this was not just a disagreement, but a warning sign of a deeper divide within the church. By the end of this part of the story, one thing had become clear. This was only the beginning. The words had been spoken, the lines had been drawn, and the audience was watching closely. No one knew how far this would go, but everyone could feel that the real storm had not yet arrived. You won't believe how fast the tension grew once the public realized this story was not fading away. What had started as indirect words slowly turned into a full conversation across churches, homes, and social media. Let me tell you, people were no longer listening casually. They were choosing sides. And the more they listened, the deeper the divide became. Donnie McClurkin continued to carry himself with calm and patience. His characteristics remained clear. He spoke with empathy, softness, and emotional awareness. He believed leaders should walk with people through their pain instead of standing above them with judgment. In his messages, he reminded listeners that many believers came to church wounded, confused, and searching for hope. He felt leadership meant guiding hearts, not controlling behavior. His past struggles had shaped this view, and he never hid that truth. People trusted him because he felt human, not distant. Gino Jennings, however, stood firmly in his own characteristics. He remained strict, fearless, and deeply disciplined. His tone did not change even as the noise around him grew louder. He believed leadership was about obedience to scripture, not emotions. In his view, the church had become too comfortable, too soft, and too focused on pleasing people. He warned that this path would lead believers away from truth. He believed correction was love, even when it hurt. This is how his message stayed sharp and unbending. But here's the shocking part. As both men stayed true to themselves, their followers became more aggressive. Supporters began speaking on their behalf, often louder than the leaders themselves. Videos were shared with bold titles. Comments turned into arguments. Churches felt the pressure. Pastors were asked where they stood. Silence started to look like weakness, and opinions started to feel like loyalty tests. This is where it gets interesting, because the debate stopped being respectful. Donnie's followers accused Gino of being harsh, cold, and disconnected from modern struggles. They said his words pushed people away instead of drawing them closer. They believed the church needed healing more than punishment. On the other side, Gino's supporters accused Donnie of compromise. They said his soft approach allowed sin to hide behind grace. They believed love without correction was dangerous. The gap between both sides kept growing wider. What makes this story different? Neither Donnie nor Gino directly attacked each other by name, yet everyone knew who the words were aimed at. This silence created even more tension. Every sermon, every interview, and every public message was analyzed closely. People searched for hidden meanings. A single sentence could spark days of debate. Destiny took an unexpected turn when neutral voices started disappearing. Even those who wanted peace were pushed to choose. Behind closed doors, church leaders struggled. Some worried about losing members. Others feared losing truth. The pressure was heavy. Donnie was often asked if holiness was being ignored. He responded by saying holiness without love could turn people away from God. Gino was asked if compassion had a place in correction. He responded by saying truth must come before feelings. Each answer felt firm, and neither side stepped back. The craziest part was how deeply this debate affected younger believers. Many young people said they finally felt seen through Donnie's message. They felt the church could be a safe place again. Older believers, however, often agree with Gino. They felt the church had lost its seriousness and needed strong leadership again. This generational split added another layer to the controversy. It was no longer just about leadership styles, it was about the future direction of the church itself. Let me tell you, the emotional weight of this story kept growing. Families discussed it at dinner tables. Friends stopped agreeing. Some believers even changed churches. The debate had moved from screens into real life. This is how a leadership disagreement became a personal struggle for many. Faith, identity, and belonging were now tied to which side people supported. As the noise grew louder, both Donnie and Gino stayed steady. Donnie continued speaking about healing, grace, and growth. Gino continued calling for discipline, order, and obedience. Neither apologized. Neither softened their message. The silence between them felt intentional. It felt like both men knew something bigger was coming. By the end of this part of the story, one truth became impossible to ignore. This controversy was no longer about who sounded right. It was about what kind of church would survive the future. The tension had reached a point where something had to break, and everyone watching could feel it. The next move would change everything. You won't believe what happened next because the story took a turn even more intense than anyone had expected. Let me tell you, the debate between Donnie McClurkin and Gino Jennings was no longer just words on screens. It became a cultural moment within the Christian community. Church members, pastors, and believers everywhere were watching, analyzing, and taking sides, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. This is how a disagreement between two leaders became a movement of its own, a conversation about identity, faith, and the soul of the church. Donnie McClurkin's characteristics stayed consistent. He spoke from experience, emotion, and personal struggle. He often shared stories from his past, times of doubt, pain, and feeling lost. These moments made his message resonate deeply with people who felt broken or excluded. His calm, loving, and patient nature made many believe that leadership should feel like guidance, not control. His supporters felt safe under his voice, and his music had always been a tool to reach hearts, not enforce rules. Gino Jennings, in contrast, intensified his messages. He remained fearless, firm, and fiery. His characteristics demanded attention. He called out what he saw as corruption and compromise, often pointing fingers at popular trends in modern church culture. For him, leadership was about keeping the church pure, disciplined, and obedient to Scripture. He believed any softness was dangerous, even if it seemed compassionate. His followers respected his boldness and unwavering principles. They felt that the church needed a strong backbone to survive. But here's the shocking part. The tension between the two styles, the gentle and the strict, was no longer theoretical. Videos and clips went viral online. Donnie's sermons were juxtaposed against Gino's fiery speeches. People started debating not only online but in their own communities. Congregations were divided, families argued, even some church leaders felt pressured to pick a side. This was where the clash became personal and the stakes were higher than ever. What makes this story different? Even though neither man openly confronted the other at first, the public created the fight for them. Every word, every sermon, every interview was scrutinized. People looked for hidden meanings and inferred attacks. The silence between the two leaders added to the drama. Destiny took an unexpected turn when neutral voices began to disappear. Those who tried to stay quiet were slowly pulled into the debate, pressured by friends, family, and online communities to declare loyalty. The generational divide also became sharper. Younger believers leaned toward Donnie's message of healing and inclusion. They felt welcome and safe under his leadership. Older generations were drawn to Gino's boldness, seeing it as a return to traditional values and discipline. This divide added complexity to the controversy. It was no longer about right or wrong. It was about identity, belonging, and the future of the church. Let me tell you, tensions escalated further when public figures began commenting. Other pastors, gospel artists, and media personalities weighed in. Some praised Donnie for his compassion. Others applauded Gino for his courage. The debate spread to radio, blogs, and podcasts, each side trying to frame the narrative in their favor. The audience felt like witnesses to a battle that no one could control. The craziest part? Even as this story went viral, Donnie and Gino remained unwavering in their core characteristics. Donnie continued to preach patience, grace, and healing. Gino continued to call for obedience, holiness, and correction. No compromise, no softening, and no direct confrontation, yet the tension grew like a storm waiting to break. As the conversation heated, believers began asking bigger questions. Should the church prioritize truth over compassion? Should grace come first or holiness? Every answer seemed incomplete, and every perspective divided the audience further. This was no longer just about two men, it was about the identity of the church itself and what kind of leadership the next generation would follow. By the end of this part of the story, it was clear that the stage was set for a dramatic turn. The quiet clash had become loud, and the public tension had reached its peak. Something was about to happen that would shock even the most devoted followers. And everyone watching could feel that the real confrontation was only beginning. You won't believe how the story reached its peak, because what happened next completely changed everything. Let me tell you, the clash between Donnie McClurkin and Gino Jennings exploded into a moment that no one could ignore. The debate had grown far beyond sermons, social media, or casual conversations. It had become a cultural storm that touched millions of lives. And this is how the quiet tension turned into a public confrontation that left everyone talking. Donnie McClurkin stayed true to his characteristics. He continued to speak with love, patience, and understanding. He shared stories from his own struggles, from moments of doubt and pain, reminding people that the church should be a place for healing. His words encouraged people to seek God even when they felt broken or unworthy. People admired him for this, saying he made faith feel accessible and safe. Yet, even with all this compassion, the pressure around him kept growing. Every word he spoke was analyzed, every sermon compared to Gino Jennings' fiery messages. Gino Jennings, as expected, stayed unshaken in his boldness. He amplified his strict, uncompromising approach, calling for discipline and adherence to Scripture. He believed the church could not afford softness and that any compromise would harm believers. His followers praised his courage and clarity. They felt he was defending the truth when others were too afraid. But the intensity of the debate created a ripple effect even beyond their immediate audiences, influencing pastors, church members, and young believers. But here's the shocking part. The public confrontation reached a point where leaders and followers alike were forced to face hard questions. The debate became about real choices: truth versus grace, discipline versus love, structure versus freedom. Every discussion, every argument, every post online pushed people to decide where they stood. And the craziest part, many who had once stayed neutral found themselves drawn into the storm, forced to defend one approach over the other. This is where it gets interesting. The conversation turned generational. Younger believers often leaned toward Donnie's message of compassion, inclusion, and emotional connection. They felt the church was finally addressing their struggles. Older generations leaned toward Gino's fiery discipline and unflinching commitment to holiness. Families argued at dinner tables, friends debated online, and congregations quietly split. The story was no longer just about two men. It was about what kind of church and leadership would survive in the future. What makes this story different? Even as tension peaked, neither Donnie nor Gino changed. Donnie continued to preach love, healing, and patience. Gino continued to preach discipline, obedience, and holiness. Their characteristics defined them, and the contrast between them fueled the controversy even further. Destiny took an unexpected turn when it became clear that the debate had sparked deeper reflection within the Christian community. People began questioning what they truly valued in faith, leadership, and community. Let me tell you, the aftermath was unpredictable. Conversations in homes, churches, and online continued for months. The controversy had opened wounds, but it also made people think. Some found clarity in Donnie's compassion, others in Gino's discipline. In the final twist, even after the dust settled, the debate continued silently in the hearts of believers. Leadership, influence, and authority had been tested in a way no one expected. By the end of this story, it was clear that the clash between Donnie McClurkin and Gino Jennings was more than just a disagreement. It was a turning point for the church, for followers, and for leadership itself. And the lesson everyone took away was simple yet powerful. Faith, leadership, and influence could never be understood in isolation. The church had to balance love with truth, grace with discipline, and compassion with holiness. And for everyone who watched, listened, or participated, the question remained, which path would they choose for themselves and the future of their faith?